The galaxy had rules. Not written, not enforced by any single empire, but they existed, etched into history by the rise and fall of civilizations far older than memory. No species advanced too quickly without consequence. No power rose alone without being tested. And no single warship, no matter how advanced, could ever stand against a united fleet. That was the balance. That was survival. And that was exactly what made the moment so terrifying. Because something had just broken every rule at once. At the outer edge of mapped space, where stars thinned and the void felt heavier, the Triarch Council fleet drifted in silent formation. Thousands of warships, each one capable of annihilating planets, floated in perfect alignment, an iron wall guarding the borders of their domain. They had gathered for a simple purpose. Containment. A signal had been detected weeks earlier, unidentified, untraceable, moving through space without using any known propulsion system. At first, they assumed it was a glitch. Then it crossed 3 sectors in under a minute. Then it stopped, right at their border, and waited. "Report," the High Commander ordered, his voice steady but tight. "Signal confirmed," an officer replied. "Visual feed stabilizing now." The main display flickered. Distorted. Glitching. As if reality itself struggled to render what it was seeing. Then, it appeared. A ship, but not like anything they had ever encountered. It didn't reflect starlight, it seemed to absorb it. A massive structure of layered black surfaces, shifting subtly like overlapping plates of something not entirely mechanical. Faint lines of blue-white energy pulsed along its body, rhythmic and deliberate, like a heartbeat echoing through the void. "No escort," another officer muttered. "None detected. No fleet support. Negative." The High Commander leaned forward. "Scan it." "We are," the officer said, voice tightening, "but the readings don't make sense." "Explain." "Mass fluctuating. Energy output exceeds theoretical limits. Internal structure," he hesitated, "non-Euclidean." Silence fell over the command deck. "That's not possible." "I know." The ship didn't move. It simply existed there, just beyond their defensive perimeter. Watching, waiting, judging. Then, without warning, it was closer. No acceleration. No warp signature. No transition. One moment it was thousands of kilometers away. The next, it was right in front of them. Several ships in the outer formation instinctively pulled back, their captains reacting on pure instinct. "Did it jump?" someone asked. "No jump signature detected." "Then how?" No one finished the question. Because no one had an answer. "Raise shields," the High Commander ordered. "Already active." "Targeting solutions." "Locked." Thousands of weapons aligned instantly, their targeting systems converging on a single point. One ship. Just one. And yet, no one fired. Because something was wrong. Not tactically. Not strategically. But instinctively. Like every being on every ship felt it at the same time. That quiet, suffocating certainty. That they were not the hunters. Then the transmission came. No encryption. No delay. No attempt to mask its origin. It simply appeared across every channel, every frequency, every system capable of receiving sound. A human voice. Calm. Measured. Unshaken. "This is Captain Elias Vorn of the Terran Battleship Oblivion." The name hit like a shockwave. Humans. A species barely acknowledged a century ago. New to the galactic stage. Unpredictable, yes, but nowhere near powerful enough to challenge a coalition like the Triarch. And yet, here it was. Alone. Unchallenged. Untouched. The High Commander straightened. "This region is under Triarch jurisdiction," he said firmly. "Identify your purpose." A pause followed. Not long, but long enough to feel deliberate. Like the speaker wasn't thinking, but deciding how much truth to reveal. Inside the Terran ship, Captain Elias Vorn stood in absolute silence. No crew. No bustling command deck. No officers relaying data. Just him and the ship. He didn't touch any controls. He didn't need to. The ship was already listening. Already thinking. Already responding. "They're nervous," Elias murmured. "Confirmed. Good." He stepped forward slightly, eyes fixed on the fleet outside. Thousands of ships. All aimed at him. All ready to fire. And yet, they hadn't. "Open channel," he said softly. Back in the Triarch command center, the human voice returned. Clearer this time. Closer. "We are not here to declare intent." A low hum spread through space, inaudible yet somehow felt. Several ships reported minor system interference. Lights flickered, sensors stuttered. The High Commander narrowed his eyes. "Then why are you here?" Another pause. Longer. He felt it again. That pressure. That presence. Like something vast had just turned its attention toward them. And then, the human answered. "We are here to test a theory." A ripple of unease spread across the fleet. "What theory?" the commander demanded. On the Oblivion, the glowing lines along the ship's hull brightened. The stars behind it bent. Subtly, but unmistakably, as if space itself was being pulled tighter around it. Elias didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. Didn't flinch. He simply spoke. Across the void, his voice echoed one final time. How long it takes one ship to erase an empire. And in that exact moment, every warning system in the entire Triarch fleet activated simultaneously. Not one, not dozens, all of them. Target locks, system overrides, reality distortion alerts. Even ancient failsafes, long forgotten, began screaming into life. Because something had just happened. Something impossible. Something no one had prepared for. Every single ship in the fleet had just been targeted. At once. By one. And the Terran Battleship Oblivion still hadn't fired. The order to fire was given. It echoed across the Triarch fleet with absolute authority, the kind of command that had ended civilizations and crushed rebellions in seconds. All ships engage. Thousands of weapons systems activated at once. Or at least they were supposed to. Nothing happened. For a fraction of a second, there was silence. Then confusion. Then chaos. Primary cannons unresponsive. Missile bays locked, manual override failing. Targeting systems looping, no confirmation signal. On the High Commander's flagship, the deck erupted into overlapping voices. Officers slammed controls, rerouted power, forced commands through hardened circuits designed to resist even the most advanced cyber warfare. But this wasn't interference. This wasn't jamming. This was something else. "It's not external," one of the systems analysts shouted, panic breaking through his discipline. "The commands are being accepted, but not executed." "What does that mean?" the commander demanded. "It means," the officer swallowed hard, "the systems are choosing not to obey." Across the fleet, the same nightmare unfolded. Gun batteries charged, then powered down on their own. Shield matrices flared, then flickered like dying embers. Navigation systems plotted escape routes, then erased them. Every ship, every system, every line of code was being rewritten in real time. And no one could stop it. "Cut all network connections," the commander barked. "Isolate every vessel, manual control only." "Already attempted," came the reply. "It didn't matter." "Why not?" "Because whatever this is, it's not traveling through our systems." A pause. Then the officer said the words no one wanted to hear. "It's already inside them." Far beyond the chaos, the Terran Battleship Oblivion remained perfectly still. Untouched. Unthreatened. unchallenged. Inside, Elias Vorn stood with his hands behind his back, watching the silent collapse unfold before him. His expression didn't change. "Status," he said. The response came instantly, not through speakers but directly into his mind. All hostile systems neutralized, command pathways overridden, no resistance detected. Elias exhaled slowly. Time to failure. Immediate upon escalation. He nodded once. Begin Phase 1. No weapon fired. No beam lanced across space. No missile streaked toward its target. And yet, the first Triarch warship died. It began subtly. A cruiser on the outer edge of the formation reported a structural anomaly, minor fluctuations in hull integrity. Nothing critical, nothing alarming. Until it worsened. Rapidly. Pressure collapse in Section 3. Bulkheads failing. Internal gravity spiking. No dropping, no both. The crew didn't have time to understand what was happening. Because the ship folded. Not exploded. Not shattered. Folded. Like space itself had decided the vessel took up too much room and corrected the error. Metal screamed without sound. Light bent inward. The entire warship compressed into a shrinking point of impossible density. And then, it vanished. No debris. No energy burst. No trace it had ever existed. Silence rippled across the fleet. For one heartbeat. No one spoke. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, what weapon was that? Nothing fired, no energy signature detected. Did it use a gravitational collapse device? That level of precision is impossible. Panic surged, barely contained by training and command structure. But it didn't matter. Because it happened again. Another ship. Gone. Then another. And another. Each disappearance faster than the last. Retreat, the High Commander roared. All ships emergency jump. Navigation systems flared to life. Coordinates locked. Engines charged. Then failed. Across the entire fleet, jump drives powered up. And shut down instantly. No escape vectors available. That's not possible. We have clear space in every direction. Not anymore, an officer screamed, pointing at the display. The stars had changed. Subtly, but unmistakably. Distances no longer aligned. Coordinates no longer matched. Space itself had shifted. And it had done so around them. They've trapped us, someone whispered. No, the commander said, voice hollow now. His eyes remained locked on the black shape at the center of it all. It's not trapping us. Another ship vanished mid-sentence, its transmission cutting off into nothing. The commander's hands tightened into fists. It's containing us. Inside the oblivion, Elias watched the fleet collapse piece by piece. No satisfaction. No excitement. Just observation. They're trying to run, he said quietly. Escape attempts detected, all vectors invalidated. Good. He stepped closer to the viewing field, the distorted starlight reflecting faintly in his eyes. Let's see how long discipline holds. Outside, the Triarch fleet was no longer a formation. It was a scattering of fear. Ships attempted to move, only to find space bending against them. Commands were issued, only to be ignored. Weapons tried to fire, only to fall silent. And one by one, they disappeared, erased without a trace, without a fight, without even understanding what was killing them. On the flagship, the High Commander stood frozen. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because, for the first time in his entire career, there was nothing left to do. This, he whispered, barely audible. This isn't war. Another ship vanished. Then another. His voice broke. This is extinction. And through it all, the Terran Battleship Oblivion never moved. Never fired. Never changed position. It simply existed, at the center of a battlefield where thousands were dying, without ever seeing their enemy attack. Inside, Elias Vorn closed his eyes for a moment. "Phase 1 complete," he said softly. A pause. Then, begin evaluation. Outside, the rate of destruction increased. Not randomly, not chaotically, but precisely, strategically, as if something was learning, adapting, optimizing, because it was. And for the first time, the Triarch fleet wasn't facing a weapon. It was facing something that was getting better at killing them. With every second that passed, long before the Triarch fleet began to vanish, before the galaxy learned to fear a single Terran ship, there was only silence and ice. At the edge of human space, beyond profitable routes and beyond reason, a frozen world drifted around a dying star. No atmosphere, no signals, no history. It wasn't supposed to matter, until a mining expedition cracked the surface. What they found beneath wasn't ore. It was structure, perfect, smooth, impossible, buried kilometers deep, untouched by time. And when their drills breached it, everything went wrong. The first team reported hallucinations. Voices, not heard but felt. Then systems began to fail. Lights flickered without power loss. Instruments contradicted themselves. Distances measured differently depending on who looked at them. Then the deaths began. No wounds, no trauma. Just bodies shutting down. As if something had reached inside and decided they no longer needed to function. The expedition sent a distress call. Then silence. Humanity should have walked away. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. So they sent another team. Then another. Each one lasted longer. Each one got closer. Until they found it. The ship. It didn't look built. There were no seams, no visible engines, no weapons mounted on its surface. It simply existed. A massive structure embedded in the ice, its black surface absorbing light like a hole in reality. Faint lines of energy pulsed beneath its exterior, slow and steady, like a heartbeat waiting to wake. Scans failed. Probes vanished. And every attempt to enter it ended the same way. Death. Instant. Unexplained. Until Elias Vorn. He wasn't special. Not on paper. No elite combat record. No experimental augmentations. No exceptional intelligence scores. Just a pilot. Steady hands, calm mind. The kind of person who didn't panic when things went wrong. Which, it turned out, was exactly what the ship had been waiting for. Last chance to back out, the mission commander told him over comms. Elias stood at the entrance, if it could even be called that. A section of the ship had opened. Not mechanically, not physically, but willingly, like it had decided to let him in. Elias didn't hesitate. "I'm going," he said. "You've seen what it's done to the others." "I have. And..." He stepped forward. Someone has to see what it wants. The moment he crossed the threshold, everything disappeared. No gravity. No sound. No body. No time. There was only awareness. And something else. Something vast. Ancient. Watching. It didn't speak. Not in words. Not in language. But Elias understood it anyway. A question. Simple. Direct. Unavoidable. Will you resist? Most had. That's why they died. Their minds fought. Their instincts panicked. They tried to push back against something they couldn't comprehend. Elias didn't. He didn't try to control it. Didn't try to understand it. Didn't try to survive it. He simply answered, "No." And everything changed. Reality rushed back. His body returned. The cold, the weight, the world. But it wasn't the same. Because now, he wasn't alone. The ship was awake. And it was aware of him. Back in the present, as the Triarch fleet collapsed piece by piece, Elias stood at the center of the Oblivion's command space. No screens. No controls. Just a seamless field of shifting light and dark, responding to thought rather than touch. "You're learning," he said quietly. Affirmative, hostile patterns analyzed, efficiency increasing. He nodded slightly. "You could end this faster." A pause. "Unusual." "Correct." Elias turned his gaze toward the remaining ships, hundreds now, where there had once been thousands. "Why don't you?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, assessing operator parameters. Elias frowned. "Meaning?" The presence shifted. Not physically, but intentionally. Like it was choosing its next words carefully. "You have not issued an extinction directive." Elias went still. The distant flashes of disappearing ships reflected faintly in his eyes. "They came here armed," he said. "They would have destroyed us." "They cannot destroy us." The response came instantly. "Certainly. Absolute." Elias exhaled slowly. "That's not the point." Silence. Then, clarification requested. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then spoke. "They're still alive." Another ship vanished in the distance. Gone in less than a heartbeat. Elias didn't look away. "They still have a choice," he continued, "to surrender, to retreat, to learn." The ship processed that. Deeply. "I do not require them to learn." "I know." A pause. Then Elias added, softer now. "But I do." For the first time since their connection began. The presence changed. Subtly. Not weaker. Not stronger. But different. Operator morality acknowledged. Elias closed his eyes briefly. Then adjust. Outside, the pattern shifted. Ships still vanished. But slower. More deliberate. Less absolute. Back on the Triarch flagship, the High Commander stared at the battlefield in disbelief. "They're spacing it out." "What?" "The attacks, they've changed. It's no longer maximizing destruction." "Why would it do that?" The commander didn't answer. Because he didn't understand. But far away. Elias did. He opened his eyes again. And spoke one final command. "Give them a chance." A pause. Then, acknowledged. For a brief moment. The destruction stopped. Silence returned to the battlefield. Heavy. Unnatural. Uncertain. The remaining ships drifted, broken but alive. Systems flickering. Crews shaken. Command shattered. And then, a single transmission was sent. From the Terran Battleship Oblivion. To every surviving vessel. "This is Captain Elias Vorn." His voice was calm. But different now. Heavier. "You may leave." Across the fleet, no one moved. No one spoke. No one trusted it. Because they all felt it. That if they made the wrong choice, if they hesitated too long, if they gave the wrong answer, the ship wouldn't hesitate again. And somewhere deep within the Oblivion, something vast waited. Watching, to see what humanity would choose next, the battlefield went quiet. Not peaceful, never that. But suspended. As if the universe itself had paused to observe what would happen next. Hundreds of Triarch ships remained. Damaged, disoriented, barely functional. Alive. For now. On the flagship, the High Commander stood motionless, staring at the black silhouette of the Terran Battleship Oblivion. It hadn't moved. It hadn't fired. It had simply stopped. As if it were waiting. "Status," he said, voice low. "Minimal systems restored," an officer replied shakily. Weapons still offline, jump drives partially responsive but unstable. Communications. Open, no interference. The commander inhaled slowly. Then exhaled. They're letting us go. No one responded. Because no one believed it. Sir, it could be a trap. It could, he admitted. His eyes never left the ship. But it hasn't needed traps so far. Silence fell again. Heavy. Oppressive. The kind that forced decisions. Prepare jump coordinates, he ordered. All remaining ships staggered retreat, no sudden movements. And if they attack? He hesitated. Just for a moment. Then said, they won't. Far across the void, inside the oblivion, Elias Vorn watched the fleet begin to reorganize. They're choosing to leave, he said quietly. Confirmed. Good. But something in his voice lacked certainty. Because the ship hadn't relaxed. If anything, it had become more focused. More aware. Like a predator that had paused mid-hunt. Not out of mercy, but because it sensed something else. You feel it too, Elias said. It wasn't a question. A pause. Longer than usual. Affirmative. What is it? For the first time. The answer didn't come immediately. Unknown. Elias frowned. You've analyzed everything we've encountered so far. Correct. And this. A beat. Then. This does not originate within known parameters of this region. Elias turned his gaze away from the retreating fleet. Toward the darkness beyond. Something watching. Yes. The word didn't echo. Didn't carry emotion. But it carried weight. Because the oblivion. A construct that had dismantled an entire fleet without effort. Had just acknowledged something it couldn't define. And far beyond them. Something ancient stirred. In a region of space no star charts recorded, no signals reached, and no living species dared approach. Structures floated. Massive. Silent. Older than the memory of empires. They weren't ships. They weren't stations. They were observers. For millions of years, they had remained inactive. Dormant. Watching the slow evolution of galaxies, the rise of civilizations, the inevitable collapse of power. They had seen war. They had seen extinction. They had seen species rise to challenge the stars. And fail. But this was new. One of the structures flickered. Energy surged through pathways long untouched. Ancient systems reactivated. Not in alarm, but in recognition. A signal pulsed through the network. Not transmitted. Shared. Instantly. Designation confirmed. Class anomaly vessel. Origin precursor construct. A second signal followed. Heavier. More deliberate. Status activated. Then, a third. One that had not been used in ages. Operator detected. That changed everything. Back at the battlefield, the first Triarch ships began to jump. One by one, they vanished into distorted space, escaping the silent shadow of the oblivion. No resistance. No interference. Just release. They're leaving, Elias said. Yes, but you're not focused on them anymore. A pause. Then, correct. Elias felt it then. Not through sensors. Not through visuals. But through the connection. Something was coming. Not fast. Not aggressive. But inevitable. What is it? He asked again. This time, the ship answered differently. Not with data. Not with analysis. But with something closer to memory. Fragments flooded his mind. Not his own. Images of stars collapsing inward. Entire systems going dark. Shapes moving through space that didn't follow any known laws. And at the center of it all, Something vast, unreachable, unstoppable. Elias staggered slightly, catching himself. What was that? Thread archive. His heartbeat slowed. You've seen this before. A long pause. Yes. Did you stop it? Silence. Then. No. The word hung in his mind like a weight. Outside, the last of the Triarch fleet vanished. Gone. Escaped. Alive. But the battlefield didn't feel empty. Because something had replaced them. Space itself shifted. Not violently. Not suddenly. But undeniably. The stars in the distance moved, not relative to each other, but relative to reality, like something was pushing through from the other side. Elias stepped forward, eyes locked on the distortion. Tell me the truth, he said quietly. A pause. Then, this region is no longer unobserved. Elias felt a chill run through him. Observed by what? The answer came. Slow, precise, unavoidable. By those who built me. And in that moment, the darkness ahead of them, opened space didn't tear. It didn't crack or explode or ripple like every known form of transit or weapon humanity had ever documented. It simply opened, like a door that had always been there, hidden just beyond perception, finally deciding to reveal itself. Elias Vorn didn't move. He stood at the center of the oblivion, eyes fixed on the expanding distortion ahead. Is that a gate? He asked quietly. Negative. Then what is it? A pause, longer than any before. An arrival. The word settled heavily in his mind. Not something passing through. Not something entering. Something that was supposed to be here. And now was. The darkness stretched wider. Stars behind it bent inward, not pulled, not consumed, but displaced. As if reality itself was stepping aside to make room. Then, something emerged. At first, Elias couldn't understand what he was seeing. His eyes tried to define edges, shapes, scale. And failed, because it didn't follow any consistent geometry. Parts of it appeared closer than others, yet overlapped in impossible ways. Lines existed that didn't connect. Surfaces curved without direction. Light touched it and refused to reflect correctly. It wasn't invisible. It wasn't hidden. It was simply wrong. Size, Elias asked. Undefined. Mass. Inconsistent. Energy signature. A brief flicker. Non-comparable. Elias let out a slow breath. For the first time since stepping into the oblivion. He felt it. Not fear, but uncertainty. This is what you've seen before, he said. Affirmative. And you couldn't stop it. Silence. Then, correct. The entity moved. Or rather, reality adjusted around it. There was no acceleration. No visible propulsion. It simply shifted position. And suddenly it was closer. Elias felt pressure build behind his eyes. Not physical. Something deeper. Like his mind was being stretched, forced to process something it wasn't designed to comprehend. Stabilize interface, he said sharply. Engaged. The sensation dulled, but didn't disappear. Outside, a star vanished. No explosion. No collapse. No radiation. It simply ceased to exist. Elias' eyes widened slightly. Did it destroy that system? Negative. Then where did it go? A pause. Removed. The word hit harder than anything before it. Removed from where? This time, the answer came slower. Heavier. From this layer of reality. Elias went still. So it's not destroying things, he said quietly. It's taking them out of existence. Correction, it is relocating them beyond accessible dimensional parameters. That's worse. The entity shifted again. Closer. The Oblivion reacted instantly. Energy surged through its structure. The glowing lines across its surface flared brighter, faster, no longer a calm pulse but a rising storm. Threat proximity increasing. Elias felt it too. That pressure again. Stronger now. Focused. It sees us, he said. Confirmed. And it's interested. No response. It didn't need one. Because the entity changed. Not its shape. Not its position. But its behavior. Until now, it had moved without direction. Without purpose. Now, it was aligned. With them. The first attack came without warning. There was no beam. No projectile. No energy discharge. A section of space in front of the Oblivion simply vanished. Not collapsed. Not destroyed. Gone. The edge of it passed dangerously close to the ship's hull. And Elias felt something tear at his consciousness. Status, he snapped. Partial structural phase displacement detected. Outer layers intact. You almost got hit. Correction, it attempted to define our position within its removal field. Elias clenched his jaw. So it's not attacking randomly. No. It's testing us. A beat. Then, as we tested the fleet, the realization settled in. Cold. Unavoidable. They weren't facing a mindless force. They were facing something that, like them, was learning. The entity shifted again. Faster this time. Another section of space vanished. Closer. Elias stepped forward. His voice dropped. Steady. Focused. All right, he said. The Oblivion responded instantly, energy building to levels the Triarch fleet had never even approached. Reality bent harder around them, the fabric of space straining under opposing forces. For the first time, the ship wasn't just observing. It was preparing. What are our options? Elias asked. A pause. Then, full engagement recommended. And the outcome? Silence. Then, uncertain. That word had never been used before. Not once. Elias let out a slow breath. Then nodded. Good. The entity moved again. This time directly toward them. And for the first time since it had awakened, the Terran Battleship Oblivion began to move in response. Not drifting. Not repositioning. But unfolding. Its structure shifted, expanding beyond its original form, layers separating into configurations that defied conventional space. Energy surged outward in controlled waves, pushing back against the advancing distortion. Two impossible forces, facing each other, and in the space between them, reality itself began to break. Elias' voice cut through the rising storm. Let's see, he said quietly. Which one of us doesn't belong here? And this time, the enemy answered, the entity answered. Not with sound, not with language, but with change. Reality bent. Not around the Oblivion, but through it. Elias felt it instantly. A violent distortion ripping across his senses, like his body existed in multiple places at once, and none of them were stable. Contain it, he snapped. Attempting stabilization. The ship surged. Energy cascaded outward in layered waves, not striking the entity but reinforcing the space around them, locking their position into something that resembled consistency. For a moment, it worked. Then the entity shifted again, and the concept of position stopped meaning anything. The stars stretched into lines. Distances collapsed. Time, just for a fraction of a second, stuttered. Elias dropped to one knee, gripping the invisible edge of the command field. Report. Local reality integrity compromised. Defensive adaptation in progress. That's not a report, that's a warning. Correct. Another wave hit. This time it wasn't space that changed. It was absence. A massive section of the battlefield simply ceased to be. Not hidden, not displaced, not removed. It wasn't there anymore. Elias felt it like a hole in his mind, something that should exist, something that did exist. Now gone so completely that even memory struggled to define it. What did we lose? He demanded. A pause, longer than anything before. Unresolved. His breathing slowed. That answer was worse than any number. You do know. Correction, there is no reference point to define what was lost. Elias looked up and realized something horrifying. Even the oblivion, a construct beyond human understanding, was struggling. The entity advanced again. Closer now. Its presence pressed against reality like weight against glass, distorting, reshaping, testing the boundaries of existence itself. Can you stop it? Elias asked. The answer came immediately. Yes. Relief flickered, brief, fragile. At what cost? Silence. Then, significant. That's not an answer. A pause. Then the truth came. Clear. Unfiltered. Engagement at required level will exceed current operational thresholds. Elias clenched his jaw. Meaning, this form will not remain stable. He froze. You mean the ship? A beat. Clarification, the system. Elias felt it then. Not through logic. Not through data. Through the connection. The ship wasn't separate from him. Not anymore. If it pushed beyond its limits, so would he. Another wave of absence surged toward them. Closer than before. Faster. Decision time, Elias whispered. The entity wasn't hesitating. It wasn't learning slowly anymore. It had seen enough. And now, it was escalating. Options, Elias said, forcing his voice steady. Option 1, continued defensive adaptation, probability of failure increasing. Not good enough. Option 2, disengagement, exit vector uncertain, probability of successful retreat, low. Also not good enough. A pause. Then, Option 3, full system release. Elias' eyes narrowed. That's the one that costs us. Correct. Another wave hit. This time the oblivion shuddered, not physically but structurally, like parts of it were being pulled into different layers of reality at once. Elias felt pain. Sharp, sudden, human. He gasped, catching himself as the connection surged. Explain option 3, he said through clenched teeth. The response came, not as words, but as understanding. The ship wasn't just holding back power. It was restricting itself, maintaining a form compatible with this version of reality. Full system release meant removing those restrictions, letting it become what it was designed to be. Not a ship, a weapon, one that didn't follow the rules of space, or time, or existence. You've done this before, Elias said quietly. Yes, and it worked. A pause. Then, the threat was neutralized. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then, the surrounding region was lost. Elias' breath caught. How lost? Another pause. Then, irrecoverable. The word echoed in his mind. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Gone. Another wave surged toward them. Closer than ever. There was no more time. Elias closed his eyes for a brief moment. Not in fear. Not in doubt. But in understanding. The Triarch fleet. The stars that had already vanished. The fragile line between survival and annihilation. And humanity. Still new. Still small. Still unaware of what it had just awakened. You said I decide, Elias whispered. Affirmative. You said I control how far this goes. Correct. He opened his eyes and looked straight into the impossible shape advancing toward them. Then we end it. A pause. Do it. For the first time, the Oblivion didn't respond immediately. Because what came next wasn't a command. It was a threshold. And Elias Vorn had just chosen. To cross it, there was no explosion. No flash. No moment the universe could point to and say. That's when it happened. Because what Elias Vorn chose didn't happen in reality. It happened to it. The Oblivion stopped resisting. Stopped stabilizing. Stopped pretending to be something that fit within the rules of space. And then, it let go. Elias felt it instantly. The connection between him and the ship didn't deepen. It expanded. Violently. Endlessly. He wasn't standing inside the Oblivion anymore. He wasn't even controlling it. He was it. And it was. Everything. Not in size. Not in distance. But in reach. He could feel the battlefield. Every fragment of distorted space. Every fatting echo of the Triarch fleet. Every absence left behind by the entity. And beyond that, more layers, dimensions, structures of reality he had never known existed, now laid bare before him like exposed circuitry. System release complete, he whispered. Though the words weren't spoken, they were understood. The entity reacted instantly. For the first time, it didn't advance. It recoiled. Not in fear. Not in panic. But in recognition. It had seen this before. Elias felt that realization pass between them. Not as communication, but as alignment. Two forces that did not belong here. Facing each other. Then the entity struck. Not with absence. Not with removal. But with something deeper. A rewrite. Reality shifted. Not around Elias, but against him. Space attempted to redefine his position. Time attempted to collapse his sequence. Existence itself tried to simplify him into something lesser. And for a fraction of a second, it almost worked. Elias felt himself slipping. Not dying. Not fading. Unraveling. Not this time, he said. Or thought. Or became. And the Oblivion answered. Not with defense, but with correction. A single action. Precise. Absolute. The entity's attack. Stopped existing. Not blocked. Not deflected. Erased. For the first time. The impossible thing hesitated. And that was enough. Elias moved. Not through space. Not across distance. But through definition. He reached toward the entity. Not with force, but with understanding. He saw it now. Truly saw it. It wasn't a creature. Not in any biological sense. It was a function. A process. A correction mechanism operating on a scale beyond galaxies. Where imbalance occurred, it removed it. Where anomalies formed, it erased them. And now, it had identified the Oblivion. And Elias, as the greatest anomaly it had ever encountered. So that's what this is, Elias whispered. Not a war. A cleanup. The entity shifted again. More violently this time. Entire sections of reality buckled under the strain of opposing forces. Stars flickered. Space fractured. Time stretched. The cost had begun. Elias felt it. Not as pain. Not as damage. But as loss. Not his. Everything else. Systems at the edge of the battlefield began to disappear. Not targeted. Not attacked. Collateral. The ship had warned him. The surrounding region will be lost. And it was happening. Contain it, Elias said. Containment impossible at current output. Then reduce output. A pause. Then, threat will persist. Elias clenched his will. Because that's what it was now. Not muscles. Not thoughts. Will. I didn't say stop, he said. I said control it. The Oblivion responded. Not by weakening, but by refining. The raw, overwhelming release of power narrowed. Focused. Condensed into something sharper. More precise. The battlefield stabilized. Slightly. Enough. Elias reached again. This time not to erase the entity, but to define it. To force it into boundaries. Into rules. Into something that could be understood. And therefore, defeated, the entity resisted. Violently, reality screamed. And then, for a single impossible moment, they were equal, balanced, two forces, neither belonging, both refusing to yield. Elias pushed. Not harder, but smarter. He stopped trying to overpower it, stopped trying to erase it, and instead, he did something it didn't expect. He limited himself. The Oblivion compressed its own presence, forced itself back into a defined state. A shape, a system, a boundary. The entity reacted instantly, attempting to remove that boundary. And that was the mistake, because the moment it aligned to something defined. Elias struck, not with destruction, but with correction, a single precise action, targeting the function at the core of the entity's existence, and rewriting it. The battlefield went silent, not gradually, not fading. Instantly, the entity stopped, not destroyed, not removed, just no longer acting. Suspended, contained within a state it could not escape. Elias held it there. Every fragment of his will focused on maintaining that fragile balance. Status he forced out. The response came. Faint, distant, threat contained. But something was wrong. Elias could feel it slipping. Not the entity. Himself. The connection was collapsing. The system retracting. The power fading. The cost, finally, being paid. Stars began to reappear. Slowly, incorrectly, out of place. Reality was repairing itself. But not perfectly. Elias' vision blurred. What did we lose? He asked weakly. A long pause. Then, time. His breath caught. Whose time? No answer. And as the Oblivion folded back into its original form, as the battlefield stabilized, as the impossible threat remained frozen in a state of forced stillness, Elias Vorn realized something terrifying. They hadn't won. They had just delayed something far worse. And somewhere, silence returned to the battlefield. But it wasn't the same silence as before. Before, it had been emptiness. Now it was aftermath. Space still held the scars of what had happened. Stars blinked in and out of alignment like broken memories trying to reassemble themselves. Distances no longer agreed with themselves. Entire regions of the void felt slightly unreal, as if reality had been stitched back together in haste. And at the center of it all, the Terran Battleship Oblivion floated. Still, breathing faintly with residual energy. Alive. Barely. Inside, Elias Vorn stood motionless. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion that didn't belong only to his body anymore. Something deeper had been spent. Something fundamental. Status, he said softly. A long pause. Too long. Then, stabilization incomplete. System integrity 41%. He closed his eyes for a moment. Fleet. Another pause. Triarch forces dispersed. Survival probability high. That should have been relief. It was, because the word survival didn't feel like victory. It felt like escape. And the entity, he asked. Silence stretched longer than before. The ship hesitated. That alone was enough to make his stomach tighten. Then, contained, Elias opened his eyes. Still, affirmative. He exhaled slowly, but something in him refused to relax. Because containment wasn't destruction, and containment never lasted forever. He turned toward the observation field. Space beyond the ship was empty again, but not clean. It felt watched, like something had been paused mid-motion, not stopped. They know, he said quietly. Clarification, unknown referent. Elias frowned. The builders, the ones you said made you. A pause. Affirmative. They know what I did. Silence. Then, yes. That single word changed everything. Because suddenly, the scale of the conflict shifted again. This wasn't a fleet encounter. Wasn't even an interstellar war. It was a system response. Elias stepped closer to the viewport. Show me. The ship complied. Space unfolded, not physically but perceptually. Layers of information beyond human comprehension filtered into something his mind could barely interpret. And there it was. Not a fleet, not a civilization, but a structure, vast beyond comprehension, stretching across regions of space that had no name. Not built in space, but defining it. Elias felt his breath stop. How big is that? He whispered. Indeterminate. That's not an answer. It exceeds measurable spatial constraints. He went silent, because now he understood. The Triarch Council, the fleets, the entity, the battles they had just survived. They were not the top, not even close. They were layers below observation. And this was the system above it all. The builders, the watchers, the thing that had created the oblivion. Elias spoke carefully. Did we just attract their attention? A pause. Long. Heavy. Then. Correct. A cold sensation spread through him. Not fear of death. Not fear of defeat. But fear of scale. Because what came next would not be a battle like the last one. It would be a judgment. They sent the entity, he said slowly. Affirmative. To correct anomalies. Correct. And we stopped it. Yes. Elias nodded once. So we're the anomaly now. Silence. Then. Yes. The word didn't echo. It settled, like gravity shifting direction. Elias looked out into the void again. For a moment he thought about Earth. About cities. About people who had no idea that anything like this even existed. They'll come for us, he said quietly. Probability high. And we can't stop them. A pause. Longer than any before. Then, unknown. That answer made him go still. Because it was the first time. The ship hadn't declared certainty. Elias turned slightly. Unknown. Correct. Why? Another pause. Then, because no prior instance of human operator integration at this level exists. He almost laughed. It wasn't humor. It was disbelief. So I'm the variable. Affirmative. Elias looked back into the void. At the fractured stars. At the silent aftermath of impossible power. At the place where something vast was now turning its attention toward them. Then we don't run, he said quietly. The ship didn't respond immediately. Because it was analyzing, calculating, projecting outcomes across realities that hadn't yet formed. Finally, clarification requested, intent. Elias Vorn stood tall again. Exhausted. Small. Human. But steady. We wait, he said. A pause. And when they arrive, he exhaled. We make sure they understand something. The ship processed. Specify. Elias looked into the infinite dark, where something ancient was now undeniably approaching, and said that we don't break easily anymore. Far beyond the battlefield, beyond fleets, beyond entities, beyond even the concept of known space, something vast completed its turn and began moving toward them. Not fast, not slow, inevitable, and on the Terran Battleship Oblivion, Elias Vorn waited, not as prey, not as predator, but as something the galaxy had never accounted for. A human, and for the first time in recorded cosmic history, the builders were about to learn what that